And now, please welcome Carol Coletta and Deputy Mayor Alicia Glen.
Hi. Okay, we have another poll question, and it's coming up. What is this question? All right, bring up the poll question. Should New York adopt commercial rent control? We just want to make it hard for you.
100%. I don't know of anybody in the audience who actually is done any real estate finance. Holy smokes.
Okay,
Wow,
so you're on record.
Wow, I'm on record. I'm going to be tweeted. Well, that's interesting that there's absolutely no dissension around that, because I think it is a very complicated issue, right?
It is
like most issues.
Like most issues.
And not sure that necessarily adopting commercial rent control would lead to sort of solve the problem that people think the problem is. So I'm not sure. I'd be curious to know sort of what the conversations have been about why commercial rent control will solve the problems that people are identifying, because I don't think that it's necessarily easy to design a regulatory framework where you also wouldn't just be protecting some businesses that, quite frankly, just aren't very good businesses, right? And I think you have to question, to what extent the city of New York or really any regulatory authority should be making decisions around what are viable businesses per se, right? I mean, there are some small businesses that are probably going to just fail because they're not very good businesses. And in fact, as we know, one out of every 2 small businesses fails within 5 years anyway. So I'm not sure that the focus should be on protecting all businesses. It should be about thinking about what makes a really healthy and vibrant mix of businesses on the street.
Well, you're foreshadowing our discussion.
Sure.
Let me back up and say it is a great pleasure to have our Deputy Mayor, Alicia Glen, back to the MAS Summit for New York City.
Home here.
You've been here probably all 6 summits.
Probably.
Wearing different hats, so this is good. We get a chance to track you. What you're working on, what's stalled out, and what's next, and which I think is fun.
Sure.
In my day job with the Knight Foundation, I run investment in communities in 28 cities across the country, and we're investing in robust public life to accelerate talent, opportunity, and engagement. So it gives me special pleasure, lots of fun, to take this segment of the summit on a city of opportunity. That's our theme. And it's no accident, given what we've seen, that this particular segment on fostering economic diversity in our neighborhoods, on our streets, follows the conversation about the urgent need for Penn Station. And here you are, you're leading both. So we're going to see what you have to say. We're getting the inside scoop today.
Sure.
So let's start with the economic diversity question. We're living in the most productive 25 square miles in the country. Real estate values are through the roof, literally.
Yes.
And as we just heard, many New Yorkers, likely many in the audience, are concerned that what makes New York, New York is vanishing. Mm-hmm. It's getting tougher to sustain. Is it inevitable, Alicia, that all those family-owned smaller shops that have operated here for decades and fledgling new businesses are simply going to be priced out of Manhattan?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, the question, that the way you framed it by saying, will they all be priced out of Manhattan, is also indicative of a very Manhattan-centric view of the city. So I think that one of the things we have to talk about...
Except it's a legitimate question. I mean, it's still a legitimate question.
Sure, it's a legitimate
question.
It's
not all of New York, but...
Right, but I think it does sort of... there's a underlying bias around where we think sort of diverse economic activity needs to be, and that it needs to be equally distributed throughout the city, with a special focus on, again, I'm a lifelong Manhattanite, and so of course I have an incredibly nostalgic reaction to when my dry cleaner closes or my local deli changes ownership. I mean, it's not that I don't feel these things in a very powerful way, but I also think that we do tend to live in a little bit of a bubble within our own large city, and so I think that it is not inevitable that we will not have a diversity of retail and small businesses across the city. I do think that there are neighborhoods that are changing rapidly, and real estate prices are at a place where commercial landlords in particular, and landlords of large residential buildings, are needing to get more traditional credit tenants in the bases of their building in order to make the math pencil. But I don't think that there isn't an equal, and it really is true when you look at the number of small businesses and new retail stores that are opening up in neighborhoods across the city, the sort of palpable vibrancy you see. I mean, walk down Atlantic Avenue all the way up to the Barclays Center, and literally every week you see new small businesses opening up. So I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but for every small business we feel that we're losing in this sort of visceral way on the Upper West Side or in the Village or any of those neighborhoods, there are hundreds of new retailers and small businesses opening up in boroughs. And so I would say that people need to take a more expansive view of it, and that neighborhoods change, and change is scary, and change is hard, but change isn't necessarily bad. And there are also, I think, pockets of interesting places where there has been an effective sort of pushback of the chain store. Today, I noticed even the MTA at Grand Central Station, there was an article today about how they rejected renewing a Starbucks lease and putting in a local Brooklyn coffee brewer in that space, even though the rent was going to be less. Because I think what's happening is that there's also beginning to be an appreciation for what I call don't be short-term greedy, be long-term smart. And having a more curated, interesting mix of retailers, even if you have to leave some money on the table up front, will ultimately make your property more valuable. And I'm seeing some of that in addition to all this explosive growth in many of the other boroughs around new small businesses.
Do you think then this is only a question for property owners, or does the city have some role in the preservation of that diversity and that texture, that rich texture
Sure. I don't think the
streetscape?
city has no role in it. I think that, at the end of the day.
What is the role then?
We have certain tools. And so, for example, we've been very clear that we are directing our small business programs to helping small business owners, particularly smaller retail shops, get access to the information they need and the tools they need to negotiate in a very rapidly changing business environment. It's a very non-transparent market. Mm-hmm. So if you're a small boutique owner or you're a deli owner, you don't have the access to the databases, right, that Starbucks has when they're running around trying to negotiate a lease or understand where rents really are. So we're creating a platform for small business owners to be able to get transparency around what rents are really like in various neighborhoods, so they're not getting taken advantage of by their landlords. We're also providing pro bono legal services for small business owners in order to negotiate their leases. And we're also creating a whole set of other entrepreneurship programs at our business solution centers and providing some grants to give fledgling businesses or legacy businesses an opportunity to try to compete. With respect to our own assets, when we are developing property, if we're going out on the street with a big mixed-use project, mm-hmm. we now have made it very clear that we will be awarding those sites to developers that are going to set aside at least some portion of the commercial space for local small business. So again, when we have an opportunity with our own assets or with our ability to provide funding, we are going to make a stake in the ground. We are going to say, there is something inherently important if we're redeveloping a big section of Crown Heights or a big section of Melrose to have preference for local small businesses to go into our projects. And we're also willing to some extent to take a hit on the price. Because again, I do think we don't want to be stupid right now. But a combination of a CVS, where by the way, if you live in that neighborhood, it's nice to have a 24-hour drugstore. There are a lot of people who live in those neighborhoods who have never been able to go to a drugstore 24 hours a day, and they might feel differently than we here saying, oh, wah, there's a CVS on our block. So I think we're trying to get that balance correct and use our tools where we can.
Well, getting the balance correct, right, is a tough thing, and picking industries to bet on is a tough thing from the city standpoint. One of your explicit strategies is to invest in publicly owned building assets like Brooklyn Navy Yard, yep. Army terminals, and turn that into fabulous manufacturing, yep. and business development, yep. spaces. Everybody, I think, loves adaptive reuse when they see it. It's sure. Fabulous. But some would say you're picking industries, and that's a dangerous role for a city versus just nurturing more organic development and allowing serendipity and the connections to happen.
Well, I think we're doing both. I think, right, there's a certain amount of organic and innovative entrepreneurship that the city will always have, and our job is to create the conditions where that entrepreneurship and innovation can be successful, right? So we're not picking a particular sector, but we're saying we understand that for all businesses to thrive, we need to have modern broadband technology available to everybody. So we're investing in broadband, state-of-the-art broadband. We need to be able to get people to be able to move from neighborhoods to neighborhoods. Again, not the old map of the city of New York, but what I call the new New York, right? Which is why we are launching the first citywide ferry system since the 1890s, right? So people can get from Queens to Bat to Bush, up and down, right? And not have to go into Manhattan to go out. Investing in infrastructure and the vibrancy of neighborhoods and using our zoning tools to say, you know what, in certain parts of downtown Brooklyn, in Long Island City, and Astoria, and other places, we are not going to just zone 100% for residential, which is where the market wants to take it. We are going to create the conditions for organic, innovative growth that has always been the hallmark of New York. That can rest, and that can be side by side with a very aggressive agenda to say, we know where the really good jobs are. We know, looking at sectors, where New York is uniquely positioned to create extraordinary jobs for all New Yorkers. And so for us, we're also going to make strategic investments, and we are, in the life sciences and biotech area, which is extraordinary. Our life sciences initiative is both a real estate play as well as a capital play. We also know that advanced manufacturing, we are on the brink of something really extraordinary here because of the relationship between tech and legacy industries. So the fashion industry, the jewelry industry, the food industry, all of media, technology, all of these are beginning to sort of converge, and we know that those are good paying jobs for New Yorkers. So of course we're going to be strategic about making investments, investing in the tech talent pipeline, investing in programs to train kids who go to public schools how to be lab technicians. We wouldn't be doing our job if we weren't having strategic interventions to help New Yorkers have jobs that will allow them to have a middle class existence. So infrastructure and creating the conditions for entrepreneurship that's organic, and then having a very strategic approach to the 5 or 6 sectors that we know we are well positioned to take more and more market share of, to help write the next chapter of New York City's economic history, to get out of our historic reliance on financial services. We have to do that. That's our job.
You mentioned the financial, the fashion sector as a sector that you want to bet on, where New York has unique advantage.
Yep.
Do you do that, and when you think about that, do you do that in the place that it has grown up, the garment district, or do you think about other
Next
real
chapter.
estate?
Sure, I think you do both. I mean, for example, we just made an enormous commitment to help FIT build a brand new building, the first building since the 70s, so that they can expand their campus right here in their historical home. But simultaneously, we've begun to work with more fashion companies, particularly in our Made in New York campaign, to have them have the modern manufacturing space that they're going to need to really take their business to the next level. So we actually have our first couple of fashion production designers and sort of interesting fashion technology going out to Sunset Park. Because at the end of the day, no matter what happens with the Garment Center, nobody would believe that it is well positioned to take the industry to the next level. So we have to be thinking about that next chapter and being able to say, we're going to be able to set aside hundreds of thousands of square feet potentially for you to grow your business now that the Made in New York sort of fashion business thesis is becoming more and more tenable because of a lot of other factors that are going on in fashion, again, which make New York more attractive for manufacturers than it has been for years. So these two things, again, one is not cannibalizing the other. I'm talking about, the 13-year-old girl who's in the Bronx right now finally designing the black pants that'll make me look thinner. I want her to make those, in Brooklyn and be able to make hundreds of thousands of pairs of them. And so we need to be thinking about the future while we're also creating the talent and playing off the legacy of what we have here in the fashion district.
Yeah, I don't care where she makes them,
As long as
she
they
makes them.
Tell me about it.
I'm all over that.
That's when I quit. That's when I'm done.
Yeah. Your focus on, you're the housing guru here. You've been at it a long time. Your focus on affordable housing doesn't include Manhattan.
That is a complete lie.
Okay, great. Speak.
Okay, number one, what was the
Push back.
biggest real estate deal in the history of the United States? Stuytown. Where's Stuytown? Manhattan. Where is Pier 40 St. John's? Manhattan. We're putting hundreds and hundreds of affordable housing units in the most expensive zip code in the United States, number one. Number two, we have two area-wide rezonings that are currently underway at the Department of City Planning. One is Inwood, NYC, which is our work with Councilman Rodriguez to rezone Upper Manhattan to have really smart mixed-use development with a huge affordable housing component. And of course, we're working with the speaker in East Harlem, where I think obviously makes a lot of sense with respect to what's going on in terms of the development path, the Second Avenue subway, et cetera. So 2 of the announced 7 rezonings are in fact in Manhattan. And every single day where we have an opportunity to do a transaction that allows us to have more economic integration in the neighborhoods, we do that in a 5-borough way, and it is very much focused on making sure that Manhattan continues to be a place where we can have all kinds of folks live.
We only have a few minutes left, and I want to ask you what you haven't been able to do yet. What do you want to do that you haven't been able to do? Or get underway substantially?
Well, I mean, look, there's so many things that all of us who love New York want to work on. I mean, I think it is very obvious to those of us who are in this business that the fundamental challenges around infrastructure and mass transit are really the underpinnings of anything we're going to do here in New York. Obviously, housing is something I care very much about, making sure, again, that the technology sector gets more integrated into our legacy industries and creates opportunities for entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm working on this wonderful initiative called We NYC, which is directed toward women entrepreneurs in New York, working with an extraordinary set of immigrant women and minority women and underserved women and connecting them to this powerhouse of women in New York to help women start their businesses. But at the end of the day, all of this is going to be contingent upon a local, regional, and national recognition that we have to invest in our infrastructure and our mass transit in a way that we have not really contemplated in at least sort of my lifetime. We are not going to be able to do everything we want to do to make New York both as much of a remain the global center for commerce, culture, and innovation without having commensurate infrastructure investments that our national rivals are. I mean, anybody, I'm sure you talked about London today and Crossrail. And I mean, what I wouldn't do to explain to the average New Yorker, we don't even control the MTA, right? And so we have jurisdictional problems, but at the end of the day, we need to get all of the stakeholders together, the business community, the neighborhoods, the various levels of government, to say we need to make a serious commitment to mass transit and infrastructure that will allow us to be the city and the region we want to be.
What's the biggest pushback you hear from businesses considering opening in New York, expanding in New York? What's the biggest pushback?
I think it's that. I think it's a concern that at the end of the day, when you look at where global capitals are and where other countries are investing in airports and rail and basic infrastructure, that it's hard to make the long-term business proposition to want to really put extra feet down in New York if you don't think those feet are going to be able to walk the streets without falling into them. I think that's a problem.
And do you find that the comparison there is to other U.S. cities or to global cities?
I think it's, obviously global more because, again, the national politics, as we all know, are not exactly pro-infrastructure, but other regions are, quite frankly, doing a better job, and we need to step up as a region, and we need everybody to get riled up and get pissed off and demand that this become really front and center of everybody's agenda.
Help me thank Deputy Mayor Alicia Glen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.